Hi, everyone. Hope you're doing well today, that you're not too overwhelmed by school or, um, I don't know, the production values of this video or, whatever. Anyways, hope it's going well right now. I thought we would, since we're talking about chapter 5 and chapter 13, it made sense rather than talk at you just to simply have the lecture sort of thing. Um, so first, just a couple things. So chapter 1, hopefully by now those principles have been enshrined, this idea of being plain spoken in professional and business communication. The narrative suite, I was after really pushing forward and trying to improve your descriptive ability. You'll notice that each response in the narrative suite had a word count. And so that was essentially meant to emphasize this tension between being descriptive and yet being concise. So making every word count. So hopefully that came through as a learning objective. So I look forward to reading your responses. You've all got your 7Cs analysis back. And now, if you do decide to go on to grad school, while you have 5 possible responses in terms of grad school essays, those of you going on the job market, these are also questions that you'll hear in interviews as well. So again, part of the objective, beginning to professionalize yourself and becoming more adept at answering all kinds of interview and essay questions. So just one bit of confusion under chapter 2. The one of the 7Cs. So I think y'all are just absolutely nailing the 7Cs. It seems like everyone has them down just fine. Just one quick clarification under constructive. This doesn't necessarily apply, and in fact, one of you pointed this out. This doesn't necessarily apply to each and every news article that you'll read. So constructive tends to apply more to interpersonal relationships and interpersonal communications, right? This might also apply to, for example, news releases. This might also apply to communications involving client or customer complaints, in which we're trying to emphasize the positive, as we'll see in our correspondence chapters. So just one small clarification, not every article is, of course, in the news or in the New York Times, Wash Post, Harvard Business Review, business sections. Not everyone is going to be positive. So chapter 3, so hopefully you did okay on the quizzes. So those quizzes are essentially meant just to simply have you test your grammatical knowledge and have you self-identify any weaknesses in your knowledge of grammar, diction, syntax, subject, verb, agreement and disagreement, pronoun use, and the like. So just 2 things I'd like you to zero in on even after you've done the quizzes. One is syntax. So syntax is the skeleton of your writing, right? Syntax is sentence construction, again, for those who have forgotten. But importantly, if you know sentence structure, if you're conscious of it, you have an easier time revising your work. You have an easier time of offering to your reader a variety of different kinds of sentences, different kinds of structures, and that can keep you from being an overly repetitive writer. So that's the idea there. So be sure you know what an independent clause is. Be sure you know what a dependent clause is. All right. And the difference in between how you join them, right? So between an independent clause and an independent clause, you need a period, 2 sentences, or a semicolon that separates them. Between a dependent clause and an independent clause, just a comma, right? And then I'd also like you to be sure that you know all the different kinds of conjunctions, right? We're emphasizing plain spoken, simple sentence structures here. However, combining sentences can often shrink down redundant prepositional phrases, other redundant languages, and can shorten clauses. It can also keep your work and your writing from having a kind of stutter effect, okay? So know those conjunctions. If you know the conjunctions, you'll know how to write better and more complex sentences when the situation calls for it, right? When the situation calls for it, well, just know your audience and write to your audience, all right? Chapter 4 is essentially copy editing. So I'll have you read that. That won't turn up on any quizzes. Essentially, that's geared to the professional editors sort of thing. All right. So some of the notations and the like, that's useful if you're signing on to a magazine as an editor or editing in some way, shape, or form. So moving on to chapter 5 and chapter 13. So chapter 5 is a fairly important chapter in as much as it tells us a couple things that will help keep our documents and our writing clean. One, the importance of lists and how to use lists effectively, right? Why is this important in professional writing? Well, because lists, rather than having an entire paragraph, are nice bite-sized chunks of text, right? Which is, in fact, the definition of modular design, right? Being able to have, rather than solid blocks of text, small blocks in which your information is presented in a concise fashion, right? It's just, so I don't know if y'all have seen The Social Network or not, but when Zuckerberg says, you know, I want the layout to be clean and simple and basic and pleasing to the eye, he's essentially talking about modular design and just simply keeping things clean, keeping them concise. So thinking of lists, so be sure you read and reread the information on those lists. Lists should be introduced, right, by a sentence. If it's a full sentence, you should end with a period after the last item. I won't dock you, but it's good to know, right? It's not, I mean, just be consistent in your professional business correspondence. I don't think anyone's going to complain if you don't. But thinking in terms of clean document design, lists should absolutely be flush, right? So each successive item should be flush with the first item on that list, all right? You're going to use bulleted lists if your information is in no particular order. Numbered lists should be used if the order is important, okay, or if there are steps involved. And lists should be parallel in grammatical structure, okay? So those items are important. The do's and don'ts of graphs. So I also have a PowerPoint that I've uploaded to Blackboard that just walks you through the main chapter concepts. If you want to review the do's and don'ts of graphs, page 124 and 125, excuse me a moment. There isn't any kind of rocket surgery here, and most of it you've probably already internalized. Things like labeling a graph, or that you've encountered before. Don't split a graph into 2 pages, items like that. So do review those either on the PowerPoint or on pages 124 and 125. On the PowerPoint, it also asks you to review the difference between serifs and sans serif fonts. So serifs have those sticky little odds and ends on the end of letters, right? And serifs don't. So review those as well. It's, you know, easy to remember. Moving on to chapter 13 now. So in terms of brochures, so I'm going to finish this brief lecture with a review of, or rather introducing the AIDA format, which stands for attention, interest, desire, and action. So the first A in AIDA is attention. You're essentially going to try to grab attention, and we're going to use this format in a variety of different documents, brochures, news releases, etc. So on a brochure, you want to be sure that your logo is front and center on the front panel, right? So that you're able to grab attention and or feature your product, right? A great picture of your product or service. So you're trying to get attention. In terms of interest, I've mentioned the newspaper formula, right? In the first paragraph, or sometimes first couple paragraphs, you're after answering those 5 W's, right? Who, what, when, where, why. Um, you might also answer how if it's applicable. And interestingly enough, you're also going to open your news releases when we get to news releases with that format as well, right? So interest, you're after trying to show with concrete and specific details your product or service description. Okay, so facts, stats, sometimes a story, although often testimonials end up in the desire section rather, but short narratives, data. All right, so you're trying to talk about this product, the most salient selling features, product or service, right? So concrete and specific details, and trying to build that interest, describe that product or service, and show it, right, as well with pictures. So again, facts, stats, data, and even a short narrative. So the chapter also breaks down just how your panels should work, right, on a typical brochure. I think you're going to find, though, and many people have, that sometimes interest and desire will kind of blend together a little bit, right? So all I'm after is you making conscious choices and being aware of the structure, okay? So under desire, for example, you're trying to appeal to pathos, right? So if interest is more logos with your facts, stats, etc. Desire is more of appeal to pathos, right? So one example that's often used is this product will save you $700, right? So that's a stat, which would go under interest. But under desire, you might instead say, well, what would you do instead with that $700? Which I took my van that I bought a month ago, used, of course. Bought a Honda minivan, and it's in the mechanic shop. And he just called me right before this. And speaking of $700, that's about what my bill is going to be. Anyways, super bummed today. So, anyways, desire might be, rather than just you'll save $700, what would you do with the $700 that you would save, right? Desire might also include testimonials, but you might also offer benefits and advantages or anticipate objections, right? And they do sometimes bleed together. And then finally, the last panel, action. And this is a place for special offers, contact info especially, that's crucial. So when applied to brochures, again, last panel will be your action panel, okay? So coupons, special offers, those limited time offers that are so useful. Burger store sends me one of those. I'm like, I got to get in there before Friday, get my free, whatever it is, onion rings, milkshake, etc. I haven't had lunch yet, so that's probably why my example is going to food. So okay, so that's 5 and 13, proceeding quickly, but trying to give you kind of a main concept introduction. What I'd like you to do is read those chapters, keep an eye and an ear out for the main concepts that I've described. Your brochure assignment is posted on Blackboard, and I can email that to you as well. But essentially, it's 2 parts: going out and finding a brochure in the community, not on campus if you can help it, because campus ones are quite limited. But essentially, finding a brochure, you will break it down just like you did your 7 C's assignment, with the caveat that this is a much shorter assignment, okay? So don't go on for 3 pages. I'm just after emphasizing the information under 7 C's, right? Being able to use that as a handy rubric to critique things, right? So not a paragraph on each C or anything like that, okay? This is much shorter than the 7 C's analysis, all right? So a couple sentences, the key image, the placement, something along those lines. And then you're going to compose your own brochure. You can use any piece of software you want. Microsoft Word has a brochure layout which is fine. It works great and it's easy. So that's fine with me as well. All right. This can be any area business. This can also be a business you're thinking about starting. So if you're interested, you have an entrepreneurial bent or interest, I'm happy to accommodate that as well. I'm very much interested in the world of startups and the world of new business. So that's interesting for me as well. So um, I think I did better this time around on being concise myself, working on getting main concepts and not going on and on. So anyways, hope everyone's well. I look forward to seeing you shortly. So write me with any questions and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much.